She heard it again, that thin, broken sound like a child crying, somewhere past the trees. But there were no children near her cabin. Not for miles. She stood frozen on the porch, hands still damp from washing, heart suddenly thudding. That's when she saw it. A dog, mangy, limping, streaked with mud and old blood. It didn't bark, just stared. Then turned, slow and deliberate, toward the woods. It looked back once, waited. Her bare feet hit the ground before she'd even thought it through. The crying came again, raspier this time, weaker, and the dog was already moving. She followed. Past her garden, over the fence, into the pines. Her shawl caught on brambles. The ground grew darker, colder. But she didn't stop. Something in her bones told her the sound was real and close. The dog moved without sound, its limp strange and steady. Then it paused, ears low by a crooked birch. And that's when she saw him. A boy, no older than 10. Shirt torn open, rope wrapped tight around his chest and wrists, tying him to the tree like a discarded animal. His cheeks were hollow, one eye swollen. His mouth hung open like he'd run out of voice long ago. She rushed forward, fell to her knees. "Sweetheart, who did this to you?" He didn't speak, just stared, then lifted one bruised finger and pointed. She turned and froze. The dog was growling now, low and slow. From the shadows behind the trees, shapes moved, slow, surrounding. Men! She grabbed the closest rock and stepped in front of the boy. "Stay behind me," she whispered. But the boy didn't stay quiet. His voice cracked like dry leaves. "They made me scream. So you'd come." Her blood iced. From the dark, something shifted. A snap of twigs. A hand lunged toward her from the trees. Then the dog leapt, snarling. Chaos, a gunshot. Her ears rang, and suddenly, silence. Then someone stood between her and the dark. A tall man, broad-shouldered, silent. He hadn't come from the trees. He'd stepped out of them. And the others, whoever they were, vanished like smoke. The boy reached for her hand, trembling. "You came anyway," he whispered. The dog licked her arm, bleeding. She still didn't know what had just happened. But she knew one thing. This wasn't over. He hadn't said a word. Not when the last shadow slipped away. Not when she tried to thank him. He just stood there, staring at the boy, eyes as unreadable as old glass. His coat was torn across the back and soaked with blood. Some of it his, she realized. But he didn't seem to care. She glanced between him and the boy, heart still pounding. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp from fear. Still nothing. Then he knelt, slowly, gently, and looked the boy straight in the eye. "You okay?" The boy nodded once. "Better now." It was the first time she saw the boy smile. Just a flicker, but real. And that's when the cowboy finally looked at her. Really looked. His gaze lingered, not in the way men in town did, but as if he was checking her for wounds she hadn't noticed yet. Then he said, "You should go." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a warning heavy as thunder. She bristled. "I'm not leaving this boy out here again." His jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. He took off his outer coat, draped it over the boy's thin shoulders, and turned back into the trees, like he was never there. "Wait," she called. "Who were they?" He paused without turning. "People who don't like witnesses." Then he vanished into the woods like smoke on wind. She stared after him, her body shaking from the leftover adrenaline. The boy tugged on her sleeve. "Can we go home now?" She looked down at him, at the rope marks burned into his skin, the dried blood on his knees, the way he still held her hand. Her voice softened. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." She carried him most of the way back, with the dog limping behind like a soldier who'd fought too long. Inside, she cleaned his wounds, fed him warm bread and broth, and tucked him into the cot near the fire. When he finally slept, she stepped outside. Just for air. That's when she saw it. On the fence post, his hat, the Cowboy's, wide-brimmed, brown and soaked through with sap and shadow, a single bullet hole at the crown. She picked it up, heart fluttering. He'd left it on purpose. That was no goodbye. That was a promise, or a warning. She wasn't sure which yet. But she knew he'd be back. And when he came, she'd be ready. By morning, the boy was awake and silent, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sewing something with a trembling needle and a piece of red thread. She watched him from the stove, the fire crackling under the kettle. "What are you making?" she asked softly. He didn't answer at first. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "It's for him." She stepped closer and saw it was a strip of cloth, torn from the coat the silent cowboy had wrapped him in. The boy was stitching a pattern into it. Not childish or clumsy, but deliberate, as if he'd seen it done before. Symbols, marks that looked almost tribal. "Who taught you that?" she asked. The boy looked up, and his eyes were different now, focused, like he belonged to something bigger than himself. "My father," he said. Her breath caught. "The man from the woods." He shook his head. "Number my real father, the one they took me from." She knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "Where is he now?" "Dead," the boy said, "but his brother's still alive, the one who saved us." Her chest tightened. "That man, he's your uncle?" The boy nodded. "They call him Stone Eyes." The name hit like a bell in her mind, half-remembered stories from traders and trappers about a Comanche scout who moved without sound and never missed a shot. A man who didn't speak because he had nothing left to say. "Why would he leave you here?" she asked, unable to mask her pain. The boy's needle paused. "He wanted to take me, but I cried for my mother." Her throat tightened. "Your real mother?" He looked at her then, looked through her. "You," he whispered. "I meant you." The dog stirred from the rug, as if sensing something shifting in the room. And in that moment she felt the ground shift too. The boy had chosen her. Not by blood, but by something deeper. A bond born in fear and fire. Before she could speak, a shadow passed across the window. Her breath hitched. She stood, heart racing. But there was no knock. Just silence. Then a soft thud at the door. She opened it. No one. Only a bundle wrapped in leather. Inside, dried meat, herbs, and a necklace made of bone and beads. And one word carved into wood. Soon. They didn't bother knocking. Just rode up in a cloud of dust, 6 of them, boots heavy and eyes colder than a bad winter. She saw them from the window. Sheriff leading, town banker beside him, and a few men she didn't recognize but knew the type. Suits and guns. "You expecting company?" the boy asked. She shook her head slowly and set the bread knife down. "Get in the root cellar. Take the dog." He obeyed without a sound, as if he'd done it before. She wiped her hands and opened the door before they could pretend it was a courtesy call. "Morning, miss," the sheriff said, tipping his hat, but not his tone. "We've had reports." "About what?" she asked. "Strangers in these parts, dangerous types. Folks say you've been harboring a child that don't belong to you." Her heart thudded, but her voice stayed steady. "That child was tied to a tree with wolves circling him. If someone has a problem with me saving a life, they're welcome to say it plain." The banker stepped forward, hands soft but stained with ink. "This is a legal matter, ma'am. There's claim paperwork, a bounty. He's no livestock." Then maybe you'd like to explain the Comanche man some folks saw near your place. The name hit like a hammer through her chest. Saw or imagined? We're not here to argue, ma'am. We just need to check the property. Not without a warrant. The sheriff's smile was thin. We're not in the city. We don't need one. One man dismounted. Two followed. She blocked the doorway. There's no child here, just a woman trying to live quiet. Then you won't mind us taking a look. Her fingers curled, knuckles white. That's when the wind shifted. A low growl from behind the house, then another. The men turned as two large dogs emerged from the woods, silent, lean, and not hers. Behind them, a rider appeared, motionless. Stone eyes, his expression unreadable, his rifle lowered but ready. The sheriff raised his hand, signaling the others. No words passed. Just fear. We'll come back, the sheriff muttered. She watched them ride off without turning her back. When she finally closed the door, the boy stepped out of the cellar, his small hand reaching for hers. You didn't let them take me. She knelt, voice soft. They never will. That night, she couldn't sleep. The boy curled beside the dog near the hearth, but her eyes stayed on the leather pouch that had been left at her doorstep, still unopened. Her fingers hesitated before untying the rawhide string. Inside were dried herbs, a small carved whistle, and a folded piece of deerskin with marks burned into it. Symbols again. The same ones the boy had sewn into the cloth earlier. But in the center, in neat, etched English, were 5 letters. M-A-E-V-E. Her name. Burned. Claimed. Not written by accident. She stared at it, her breath frozen in her throat. He knows your name, came the boy's voice in the dark. She turned. He was watching her, wide-eyed but calm. Why would he send this? She whispered. Because he wants you to know he sees. She folded the skin, hands trembling. Sees what? The boy didn't answer, just turned over and closed his eyes, as if the matter was already settled. But she stayed awake, staring at the pouch, heart pounding louder than the wind outside. At dawn, she found herself walking toward the edge of the woods with the pouch in hand. There, hung on a cedar branch like a signal, was another gift. An eagle feather wrapped in red string. Tied around it was a ring of twisted horsehair. She knew the meaning before her fingers touched it. Not a threat, a proposal, the Comanche way, a silent offer. No words, no pressure, just a gesture, a choice. Behind her, the dog barked once. She turned to find the boy standing barefoot on the porch. He's asking for your hand, isn't he? He called out. She didn't answer, but her knees almost buckled at the truth of it. And what if I say no? She called back, half to him, half to the wind. The boy shrugged. He'll leave you in peace. That's what men like him do. Her throat tightened, because she knew that was true. He'd walk away without blame or shame, no forcing, no fire, just a man who gave her back her voice, and waited to see what she'd say with it. She picked up the feather, held it in both hands, and for the first time since the wolves, she realized. She was no longer scared of being chosen. She was scared of choosing back. The sound of hoofbeats came just after noon, unhurried, deliberate, and singular. She didn't look up from the basin at first, thinking it was the sheriff again, but the dog didn't bark. It stood, quiet, alert. That's when she turned. He was there, just beyond the fence. Dismounted, reins in one hand, the other resting on the saddle horn. Stone eyes. No war paint today, no rifle either. Just a man in worn buckskin, his face unreadable, but not unkind. She dried her hands and stepped onto the porch. No words passed between them for a long moment. Finally, he lifted the pouch she'd returned that morning, now filled with something new. Trade, he said. Just one word. She walked forward slowly. Close now, she could see how tired he looked. dust on his boots, shadows beneath his eyes. She took the pouch, opened it, and pulled out a single object. A carved wooden figure, unmistakably shaped like the boy, with his lopsided braid and all. She felt her breath hitch. "You made this?" He nodded once. "He dreams better now, because of you." Her throat closed. "He's safe here." The Comanche man tilted his head, like he was listening not to her words, but her breath behind them. "Safe is not enough," he said softly. "Not for him. Not for you." He pulled something from his belt, an old silver coin, its face worn blank. "My mother gave me this, said I should use it to buy what I cannot earn." She shook her head. "I'm not for sale." "I know." He placed the coin on the porch railing. "That's why I trust you with him. With me." Her chest ached. "You don't even know me." "You fed my son," he said. "You faced wolves. You told men no. That's more than most wives would do." The word hung in the air like smoke. Wife. She stared at the coin, at the figure in her hand, at the man who hadn't asked for anything, just shown up, steady as stone, with no promises except the kind that lived in actions. The boy's voice broke the silence from the door behind her. "Is he staying?" She turned halfway, heart thudding. The man didn't answer. He just waited. For her word. For her choice. For something she wasn't sure she'd ever been allowed to give before. Permission. That night, Maeve couldn't eat. The stew simmered, the fire crackled, and the boy hummed softly as he brushed the dog's fur with an old comb, but her hands stayed still in her lap. Across from her, the Comanche warrior sat silent, legs crossed, back straight, as if waiting for some invisible signal she didn't know how to give. It wasn't fear that kept her quiet. It was the weight of choice. Too many years had passed with other people deciding her worth, men who looked at her hands, her hips, her silence, and named her everything but woman. Everything but equal. Now this man sat in her cabin, beneath her roof, asking nothing but a yes or no that came from her. And she didn't know how to answer, not because she didn't want to, but because no one had ever made space for the wanting. He finally spoke. "Do you remember the sound the wolves made?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, like crying." That was fear. Even they feel it when the world turns unfamiliar. She looked up. "And now?" "Now I sit in a place not mine, with a woman not mine, and a boy who might become something new. I feel it too." She studied his face, not a flinch, not a lie, just the truth, handed to her gently. "I don't know how to be anything to anyone," she whispered. He gave the faintest smile. "You already are, to him, to yourself." Her voice caught. "But I'm not strong." "You were stronger than the wolves." That broke something. She rose, suddenly overwhelmed, and went outside. Cold wind brushed her cheeks, but she welcomed it, stared up at the moon, tried to remember the last time someone asked her what she felt, not what she owed. Footsteps came softly behind her, but he didn't touch her, just stood nearby. "Maeve," he said. Her name, that was all, as if that alone was the question. She turned, trembling. "Do you want me to say yes tonight?" He met her eyes. "Only if it's your truth. Not because the boy needs it, not because I stayed. Only if you see your future in it." Her voice came out like breath after drowning. "Then ask me again, tomorrow, and I'll answer like someone who finally belongs to herself." Maeve didn't sleep much, but it wasn't the restless kind of night she used to know. No dread, no waiting for a door to slam, or footsteps to rise in anger. Instead, she lay awake beneath her quilt, staring at the ceiling while the dog shifted beside the hearth and the boy mumbled softly in dreams. And outside, she heard him, Stone Eyes, sitting against the porch post, humming something low, something ancient. By the time the sun pushed weak gold through the shutters, she was already up. Not dressing in fear or rushing with duty, just standing in the quiet, brushing her hair, setting 2 bowls instead of 3. When she stepped onto the porch, he was still there, still waiting. His eyes met hers. Steady. No assumption, no smile even, just the same silent asking he'd carried from the first moment. And she realized something. He wasn't testing her, he was trusting her. "Come inside," she said, voice clear. "Not for Stu, for the rest." He rose, slow and certain, and followed her in. The boy looked up from the floor where he was drawing lines in ash with a stick. "Is he staying?" Maeve glanced back. "He's welcome, too." The boy grinned. The dog's tail thumped once, and Stone Eyes simply nodded. Later that morning, while the boy ran down the creek path and the dog followed, Maeve found herself alone with him again. He stood by the open window, carving another figure. "What happens now?" she asked. He didn't stop working. "We share what's real, day by day. If you ever say no, I ride." She stepped closer. "And if I say yes? Then I stay. But not to take over, not to fix, just to build something beside you." She stared at his hands, strong, patient hands, and felt the weight of every bruise and slight she'd ever hidden beneath her skin. "I want to build something that doesn't begin in fear," she whispered. He looked up. "Then don't start with fear, start with choice." That afternoon, they planted seeds together in the back garden, no words, just soil and breath and rhythm, and when the sun sank, he reached for her hand, not to lead, not to claim, but to walk beside her. For the first time in her life, Maeve didn't flinch. It began with dust, a strange column of it swirling beyond the trees, too narrow for a storm, too fast for cattle. Maeve saw it first from the garden fence and froze, one hand still buried in the earth. Stone Eyes joined her without a word. He watched the trail, jaw tightening, eyes narrowing. "They're coming," he said. "Who?" she asked, wiping her hands. "The ones who wondered where I went." He didn't seem afraid, just alert. The boy, clutching a carved horse, peeked from the porch. Maeve told him gently, "Inside now, sweetheart." Then she turned to the man beside her. "Will they understand?" "Some might," he replied. "Some won't." The dust swelled until it became clear. 5 riders, their horses lean and silent, faces painted in hues of shadow and fire. Comanche. His kin. They didn't shout or draw weapons. They simply stopped 10 feet from the gate, staring. One of them, older, dismounted first. He spoke in their tongue, voice like gravel and wind. Stone Eyes answered in kind, steady, measured. Maeve didn't move, didn't flinch, even when all eyes turned to her. The older warrior finally stepped closer and looked Maeve straight on, as if weighing more than just her frame. Then he glanced at the boy peeking from behind the window and the dog sitting firm at the porch steps. Slowly, he pulled something from his saddle. A red cloth, thick with stitching. He held it out to Stone Eyes, who in turn offered it to Maeve. "What is it?" she asked softly. "A sign," he said. "That they accept." "Accept what?" "That my life now stands beside yours." Maeve took the cloth with shaking hands. It was warm somehow, heavy not with threat, but with meaning. The other riders nodded, one by one, then turned their horses and rode back into the trees without a word. Only the elder remained, eyes never leaving Maeve. Then, unexpectedly, he bowed his head once, low and deep, before mounting and following the others. When the dust cleared, silence returned. Maeve looked down at the red cloth, then at the man who'd once been a stranger with a wounded dog and a soft-spoken son. I didn't expect witnesses, she said. Stone Eyes smiled faintly. Some stories deserve them. And together they walked back inside, as if nothing had shifted, though everything had. Maeve sat by the fire that night, combing the boy's hair as he leaned into her lap, eyelids fluttering with sleep. The dog lay curled beside them, tail twitching in contentment. Across the room, Stone Eyes whittled in silence, shaping a small wooden feather. Delicate, balanced, unmistakably Comanche. Outside, the wind had settled, but inside the cabin something deeper had quieted too. For the first time in years, there was no echo of fear in the walls, no waiting for the next blow, the next command, the next abandonment. Only stillness, only breath, only choice. Will you stay? The boy asked drowsily, his voice barely a whisper. Maeve paused, heart aching at the question, not because she doubted, but because she never thought anyone would ask her that way. Gently, she kissed the boy's crown. If you'll have me, she said. Stone Eyes looked up. We both will. Later, when the boy had gone to bed and the fire had dimmed to a quiet glow, Maeve sat beside the warrior who had once walked up to her porch with nothing but patience and silence. He handed her the carved feather. For your hair, he said simply. So you remember this day. She traced its ridges. I thought stories like mine ended with the girl disappearing, or breaking, or turning bitter. That's not your story, he said. It was, she admitted. For a long time. But maybe it doesn't have to be. He didn't speak. He just opened his hand, offering nothing, demanding nothing. She placed the feather in it. Put it in for me? Stone Eyes moved behind her, his fingers gentle as he tucked the symbol into her braid. Does that mean yes? He asked. Maeve smiled. It means I'm writing a new ending. Outside, the sky turned lavender above the hills. The boy's drawings lay scattered on the porch. Sun, dogs, horses, and 3 figures standing hand in hand. The cabin, once a place of hiding, now held the quiet of something being built, not escaped. Something real. Something sacred. Maeve closed her eyes as the wind stirred the grass and the stars blinked awake. Her story had changed, not by force, not by rescue, but by choosing and being chosen in return. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on Echoes of the West. If you'd seen the dog come limping to her door, would you have opened it too? Tell us in the comments.